Car washes were booming, private equity was paying up, so why would two seasoned developers sell, pivot, and bet big on Class A climate-controlled storage? Today we're pulling back the curtain on a built-to-core self-storage model that garners the interest of big names in the storage space such as Public Storage, Extra Space, and CubeSmart, just to name a few. I'm Kevin Bupp, and this is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, where we go beyond headlines to unpack the playbooks of operators building durable income and long-term value. Here's what's coming up. First, the blueprint. Why 70 to 90,000 net rentable square feet, full climate control, and a drive-through design make big players actually want to manage your asset. And later in the show, we're going to discuss how entitlements turn not so valuable dirt into a prized asset with real equity. And then lastly, we're going to talk about when to pull the ripcord on a deal and eat $30,000 to $40,000 in pursuit cost. Our guests are Bill Kanatas and Ben Salzberg, co-founders of Self-Storage Developers. Bill's a finance-first developer with decades across retail, office, and housing. Ben's a Six Sigma operations vet who saved Fortune 500 companies 9 figures and now applies that rigor to national storage builds. Together, they've shifted from express car washes to institutional-grade storage run by third-party publicly traded operators. So let's go ahead and dive into the show. My friends, how you doing today? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having us on the show.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you so much.
Excited to have you guys here. Excited to talk shop, pull back the curtain, learn a little more about your background, your business, and you guys are in self-storage today, but you've got a background prior to that, right? And so how about we start there before we dive into the mechanics of what your business looks like today in the self-storage space. Again, you both came out of the express car wash development side of things before moving to self-storage. So I guess let's start there. What made you realize, or when did you come to the realization that storage was a better long-term play?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think we were looking at self-storage facilities for years. Prior to even doing car washes, we developed strip centers, office buildings, office condos, and then got involved into the express car wash model. Obviously, car wash has been around for a long time, since the 60s. The express model came much later when people realized that it was very, very labor intense, right? Your car washes of the 60s are not the car washes of today. And most modern car washes now have a tunnel system and usually 1 or 2 employees that are working there. And they're primarily watching the pay stations to make sure that they don't break down or the facility breaks down. That was a great endeavor we did for several years. What's interesting about the self-storage model, at least from our opinion, is you have the major REITs that are operating that, where the car washes, you still don't have major REITs that are operating those. You have a lot of family owned or even investment private equity groups that own maybe 100 of them across the country. I think there's like 60,000 car washes in the United States these days. So there's obviously different groups that own them, as well as the mom and pops. But when you talk about self-storage, you're talking about publicly traded big companies like your Public Storage or your Extra Space Storage, CubeSmarts, that are operating these. And I think that's kind of why we've pivoted out of that car wash and into more of the institutional REIT properties and asset classes.
Anyone that's tuning in here now, I mean, I guess unless you live out in the middle of like Montana or Wyoming, some rural market, more than likely, if you're in a somewhat of a prime market, you probably have at least one, if not, maybe even, dozens of car washes that have opened up in your general vicinity, in your MSA over the last couple of years. It seems like the last 5 years have been the absolute heyday for new car wash developments. And maybe that's just my perspective. I'm down in the Tampa Bay area and they're everywhere. I mean, to the extent where there's a few that are struggling because there's, 5 more, within a mile stretch on the same road. And so, there's an oversupply from what I've seen, but, maybe there's other markets where that's just not the case. So I guess where I'm going with that question is, the boom has been real. And I think everyone has seen the boom in the car wash industry in the past 5 years. It seems like it's been on rocket fuel. Lots of private equity getting into space, trying to gobble up as many as they can. What was the reason for the pivot in 2021 when, seemingly car washes were on fire in a good way?
Here in Illinois, we had COVID that happened back then, right? So some states had a, closed action where the businesses needed to close. So right at that moment, we were all trying to figure out what we're going to do, right? We had closed down the operations. PPP money was being sent to everybody. And just for us personally, we had other partners. It wasn't just Ben and I. We had an investment group in at that time as well. and everybody's trying to figure out how to get out of some of their investments and trying to figure out where they're going to go to. So it was a perfect timing. Private equity was looking to get in, and we were looking at other opportunities. So they came in with a nice check size, wanting to buy everybody out. The part of the original founding members stayed in. They're the operating partners, and to this day, they still operate them, and we're close friends with them. So they stayed in with private equity, and Ben and I and a couple other partners got out.
Anything you do in life, Kevin, is about location, 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 right? And so even though you mean car washes are saturated in some markets, but other markets they're not. And so, people who are in it, that want to be in that market may be great for them, depending on where they're at. We are real estate commercial brokers too. So we do a lot of, analyzing every day, where we're putting our self-storage facilities.
And they're still doing very well. I mean, when we sold our position out, we had 4 that were open and operating, 2 that were under construction, and today I think they have 12 or 13 that are operating. So they continued with that model. It's still doing very well for them. They're great operators. So that also obviously has a big play with any business, right? You have to have good operations. So good group of guys.
Ben and Bill, give us a better understanding of your firm. I guess what respective roles each of you guys play in the self-storage arena. Underneath your firm's brand. I guess this so we can better understand you individually, where your skill sets lie, and how you guys apply them to the self-storage space.
So I'm an engineer, mechanical engineer education, MBA, specialized in quality. I'm also a teacher. So I do a lot of I do most of the operations, and I look at the engineering work that has to be done, the getting all the labor, analyzing all the different aspects of the project, and facilitating, and looking to make sure that we have a proper process in place. And so based on my background, I've been doing operations engineering for, 30 years, 28 years with problem solving. I'm a Six Sigma specialist since the inception of Motorola. I was class number 1. I saved companies over $100 million. I used to lead our Amtrak, ADP, Abbott, AbbVie, and real estate to me is fantastic. I love it. It's about people because I love people. And Bill and I met a while back, but Bill's a smart cookie. He is the CFO of the company, and so we work hand in hand.
Thank you, Ben. How about yourself, Bill?
So my background is in financing and development. I started developing about 30 years ago, but I started off by purchasing a residential mortgage company, and we were actually had a banking license, so we were able to fund with our own funds on a warehouse line and then sell it on the secondary market. And I was always interested in financing and developing, and we got into it kind of by accident. We had a developer that was doing single family homes that came up to us to get some financing. We ended up investing with them and then rolling into financing with them. And from there, we did a lot of single family homes, as I mentioned earlier, retail strip centers and office buildings. Matter of fact, we had done something in St. Petersburg, Florida. I used to come down to Tampa all the time myself. I was on a board of directors of a company back in the day, helping them with some financing. So financing has always been something that I loved and pursued. So as Ben mentioned, I took the role on as the CFO. We work on things together. I mean, the reality is, we both go to the meetings with the villages and we work with the local politicians and work with our design team. And we have a lot of consultants that we work that are really more family than anything else. They're really our internal team of consultants that work with us who are not only in the business, but they also own self-storage facilities themselves. So we're in a good space with some really good people.
If you have good people around you, you make good projects and products. And that's what we do. That's what we do best.
Help us better understand the business model. Are you developing underneath the umbrella of a larger brand, or do you have your own independent brand? How does that work?
Sure. So we develop under a different brand, and this is not a franchise model. So it's not like let's get together and get a Subway or some kind of other franchise that's available out there. It's third party management. We like using the REITs. So right now, Ben and I are developing a new project in a suburb of Chicago. We just closed on the land a little over a month ago, and that's going to be a public storage. So under the third party management, think of it as you own a multifamily and it's large enough where you need to hire another property manager. The only difference I would say is they do all the marketing for it and the employees belong to them. and then the LLC on a monthly basis would pay back, their cost for their running of their employees. The best part of that is if somebody doesn't show up to work today, if you and I had a Subway together, hypothetically, I always use that as an example, then you and I are over there making sandwiches where, somebody like Public Storage, because everybody's on the same system, they're able to get into the building. They use the same computers. They have the same revenue model. Somebody can walk in there and actually make a payment for another public storage facility if they wanted. And other public storage facilities can also, collect money for somebody that's a tenant in our building. So it's definitely a third party, but it's not a flag. It's not like a Marriott hotel or like we said, a franchise model.
How does that work? So using that as the example, public storage, you're going to use them as a third party operator. Are you required to build to certain specs that fit kind of their build box before they'll agree to take on third party management? And are there any future obligations that you have to that brand as it relates to like a first right of purchase, if you decide to sell at some point in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is some of the design features that you want to incorporate when you're doing a public storage, and some developers do one that's more of a vanilla envelope. That way, they don't know until last minute if they're going to go public or Extra Space or CubeSmart. They may leave the colors out, and then the sign will kind of really identify you as what operator you are. But one of the things is the office is a perfect example. They want it a certain way. So if an employee from public storage goes into another one, it's set up the exact same way. You're going to have their system set up the same way. You're going to have their key fobs for entry into the building a certain way. So those are expenses that you're going to have to lay out up front. Hopefully, you know what operator you're going to go with. So you use the systems that they have in place. Other than that, one of the things that you want to look at is you want to make it big enough so it is an institutional grade. You also want to build it so it's a Class A facility. All of our facilities are climate controlled. The new one that Ben and I are doing is a full drive-through. You drive in one end and come out the other end. But we try to have a minimum of 70,000 of net rentable square feet. So it's considered to be operated by a REIT, or they want to operate it, I should say. But ours are typically over 90,000 square feet. So if you're going to be looking to develop one that's going to be operated by one of the big boys, you want to develop north of 70,000 square feet. And then you try to work with them part of the design build, because they have a lot of influence, like, the office doesn't really look good there. It'd be better if you had it over here, or, move the bathrooms here so the manager can use it. So we get their input on it. But at the end of the day, you own it. They don't own it. They'll operate it if it's in the market they want to be in.
And they just don't take anyone, Kevin.
Of course not.
I mean, we have relationships you have to build. You have to, make sure that all the analytics are properly set in line with their analytics. So it's not like even if you do an A-class facility that they'll take you. That's not correct. There's a lot of back work that has to be done.
Yeah, we've heard stories from other developers that thought this was the best project in the world. They didn't consult with any of the big boys. They built it, and then they said to them, okay, we're opening up in 60 days. Let's talk about doing it. And they're like, I'm sorry, but we're not A, in this market. B, we're oversaturated, because they don't want to fail, right? I mean, it's good to make, 4 or 5, 6%, whatever they charge as a management fee. But at the end of the day, that's not really what they're all about. At the end of the day, these third-party management companies are inside there operating it for you with hopefully the goal to one day maybe buy it from you, right? But they're not going to buy anything just because it's there.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point. Would love to talk about that a little bit. And as it relates to location, right? Location is everything with real estate. How involved are these larger brands with giving you direction? Like, hey, Ben, Bill, we want to be in these respective submarkets. Like, so if you find something there that fits our buy box, you can buy the land at the right price. We'll do the deal. Do they give you guidance like that? Is there parameters that they set forth that you guys can simply go hunting?
We have to do all the running and the hard work. That's
okay.
All of it.
But
and tying up the property. I don't know their politics, obviously, but I'm guessing with a company that's a publicly traded company, they're not sitting there saying, hey guys, we're pointing you in the right direction, go build it and we'll buy it one day. I mean, there's just a lot of things that go into these. But no, the short answer is they don't give you any of the guidance. Ben and I find the pockets. We have our own analytics. Ben is great at finding projects and doing the analytics on it. Once we do that and we love it, then we talk to our consultants and run it through the second, ringer through them, make sure that they like it. And then we'll sit down with Public Storage or Extra or Cube, whatever it is, and just say, what do you guys think of this market? But we kind of know before we go to them what they're going to say, because we know they're in the market. We know what they're getting from the rents. We know if there's a demand. So we're doing all of our homework. We're not just saying, here's 20 properties, tell us which is the best one. They don't got time for that.
Give us some of the priority check boxes of what you guys are looking for to determine whether or not a market's viable.
Yeah, I mean, we looked, for rental, how many people are renting in the area, population. We look at how far other self-storage facilities are in a 3-mile radius. I mean, that's big, right? You don't want to be competing against with 100 other people with the same, opening up. You don't want to do that. But how the traffic counts, right? How much traffic is going by your facilities, and per capita, the square footage per person and the population. So, we do what's called around 7 per capita. We look around that or less. But there are a lot of analytics. So when you find a storage facility, or when I find a storage facility in an area, I'm like, great, I love it. And then you look at, okay, the traffic area or the rental community is like 2% in the area. Well, you don't want that.
You want more renters than homeowners. Okay. Is it like hey, like 40% renters, 60% homeowners? Like that's a good ratio, or is there general rules of thumbs that you guys go by, quick and dirty? Like if it was only 30% renters, you're like, there's no way, that's never going to work. Is there a certain floor that you guys are looking for to push you into like, okay, well, we check this one box, makes enough sense to continue moving forward and taking a deeper dive into this to see if it checks all of our boxes and could become a potential viable prospect?
It all depends. You have those checks and balances. You may have a good rental rates with low renters. So you may have, it all depends.
What type of market is $4 per square foot? Are there, what markets are we, is that like in LA or like New York City?
Yeah, San Diego.
$4 a foot. Wow. So for some context, everyone knows like what a typical 10 by 10 unit looks like, right? Like that's the most common, floor plan, I would say. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think probably 5 by 10 and 10 by 10, but like, a 10 by 10 space, $400 a month. Like that's insanity. But I guess if you live in a expensive market like San Diego, then that's just the norm.
Think about this. You have a condo and you're paying X amount of dollars for a condo, right? And then it's cheaper to rent than to buy more room in a condo. It's cheaper to rent, even at $4 square foot.
We're data driven. Ben touched on these points around population density, income levels. One of the things is competition saturation that we look at. So to Ben's point, you got to look at everything, right? So basically, every project starts with solving a problem. So what is the problem in that community? If there's a lot of renters, they may need more space, right? Or we were in a community where the mayor said, hey, the homes across the street has a homeowners association that don't allow them to park their cars or their boats there. And where are they going to put that stuff? So they needed more exterior space, or they don't have any basements, right? So like homes give you an example, in Arizona or in Las Vegas that are being built without basements, they're going to need more storage, and that is less renters, but homes without basements. So there's just so many factors that you really got to look into when you're putting this whole piece together. It's like a lasagna, right?
I guess in the last, since rates have taken a steep climb, they're starting to come back down again, slowly but surely. But obviously, the last couple of years have been fairly stagnant as it relates to folks moving, new supply coming out of the market and getting absorbed. Just in some markets, there's oversupply of a multifamily product or even single family homes that will take time. It will get absorbed and the population will kind of fill in those gaps. But how has that impacted, at least, directly within your business itself? Have you guys seen impact on some of your projects that just haven't necessarily hit the mark as far as projections and pro formas as it relates to the slowdown that's occurred the last couple of years?
I think that the slowdown occurred after COVID, but it's actually inclining as far as the rates. They're going back up.
You talk about the rates per foot, rents per foot. Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, correct.
I guess what I meant is like with less people moving, not as many folks are moving from household to household. They're staying put a little bit longer. Like the data shows that there's more renewals of leases than new leases being signed, right? So people are kind of to stay put at this point in time, just not as much movement that maybe was happening during the latter half of 2020, 2021, 2022. The economy has just slowed down quite a bit. Has that impacted the self-storage industry at all, or more specifically your business?
Short answer is yes, but not a lot. And I'll tell you why. And it's because we're not only relying on people moving for self-storage, right? So Ben will tell you, in the self-storage, arena, we talk about the 4Ds. So you got death, divorce, dislocation, and downsizing. So downsizing is where people are moving, right? But people are going to die. And, the kids are trying to put their stuff in storage till they decide what they're going to do with it. I have got friends that have kids that are still in college, and they're always using storage in between in the summertime as they're moving between the houses and the frats and all that stuff. You got divorce. Unfortunately, it happens, and people need to put stuff in storage. Dislocation, people are moving, right? So they're moving from one job to another job. So it's not just the moving of the household. There's other people. There's businesses that might be closing that they need to put their stuff away, right? So it's not just the housing market per se. It is a factor. Don't get me wrong, but it's not 100% of our business. If it was, I think that would give us more problems. Keep in mind, I think self-storage is probably the only asset class that is resilient, to good times and bad times, right? It's always there. People have been using it since the 70s, and it seems to, been out living and out performing every other asset class.
Fair points there. Although manufactured housing, I think, takes the trophy on that one, but that's for another time.
We want to do a show to invest with you guys.
Yeah. Would love to understand your process through not necessarily even just through the entitlement process, but you've got to get really good being developers at winning over municipalities, local communities, neighborhoods that are surrounding an area that you're looking to develop. Like there's a lot. I think you guys probably sharing some of the same skepticism, probably not nearly as much, but probably somewhat similar as maybe what we do in the manufactured housing space. Like you got the whole NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard. You got municipalities that they might envision one thing of what your finished product is going to look like, which is far from what reality is going to be. Right? Like they're envisioning this ugly metal box with this 90-degree square corners and no aesthetic appeal whatsoever. And that's just the farthest from the truth, right? There's some, gorgeous self-storage facilities that are stuccoed and finished nice and pretty. And you wouldn't even know that it's a self-storage facility unless you actually were renting from it, right? You drove into it and went inside. What are some of the biggest misconceptions then that city officials have, and how have you guys been able to overcome them and get approval and get support from these local municipalities?
The cities, I said earlier, there's a problem that you need to solve, right? So when you sit down with the village, and I'll say Ben does a great job when we sit down with the villages. Ben's an elected official for the last 9 years for a college. He ran for state senate. But he's not afraid of politics, and he's not afraid to sit down and talk about what is it your constituents need, right? There is a need here. So we're not trying to cram it down their throat. When we were doing the car washes, that was a whole different story because they're worried that you're going to have your 60s, cars out there with loud music and everybody's going to get together. So you had to overcome that, or the vacuums are going to be so loud that the neighbors are going to complain. But when it comes to storage facilities, you don't have a lot of traffic, right? You're not having tons of cars pulling in and pulling out. So it's pretty quiet for the neighborhood. The one thing that the villages would like to have, it doesn't create taxes for them like sales taxes, but sometimes there's other options that you could put in place to bring some revenue to them. But when we look for our developments, we look for areas that might be blighted, right? That we're helping them. Maybe it's a property that we can redevelop that was a closed down big box that might be closed for 3 or 4 years, where they would welcome some new life in there. The one that we're doing right now, it had EPA issues. So we sat down with the village and said, this has been a dump for the last, 30 years. Do you want some developer to come in there and clean it up? Because I think you do. So I'll tell you what, why don't we develop it? And we were able to put it in a TIF. They had a TIF already that they were planning on doing it. So it kind of got expanded to include us. And we were able to get some tax incentives there that benefit the village. So to Ben's point is, you got to sit down with the village and find a piece of property that they really need to see developed, right? And I have a picture, you can't see it, it's on the other side of my desk, of a building that has multifamily on floors 3, 4, and 5. And on floors 1 and 2 is self-storage. But the way it's designed on the first floor, we also have, like a T-Mobile or a Verizon that does generate sales tax dollars from, or it might have a Dunkin' Donuts with the drive-through that's going to bring in the volume. So we think outside the box all the times when we're meeting with these villages. What is it that we do for you?
Right. It's all about working with the community, Kevin, right? And so we can work together and sync with the community and their master plan and make sure it fits in the organization rather than cram it down their throat. That's the better way to do it.
And are you guys typically going in and grabbing fully entitled, shovel ready land, or are you getting it far before that and running through the entire entitlement process?
Ben and I love to run into the wall.
Yeah, we like to do the hard route, the hard way. We like to entitle it. We like to get everything done ourselves.
So, truth be told, it takes a lot of work to do that, as you probably already know, but you're creating value, right? So that value is down the line also equates to equity. So when you're raising equity for all of these deals, Ben and I more than likely have a lot of money. Not only do we spend our time and effort into it, but once you get it entitled, that property is worth more money. Sometimes we're lucky to put it into a TIF or get into a tax incentive program like a 7B, which is a property tax. That keeps increasing the value of it. So yeah, we start from scratch.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's where a lot of the value is made. Obviously, there's some risk associated with that as well, because not every deal, makes it all the way through the entitlement process, and there's some pursuit cost and just sunk costs that, are just the cost of doing business is the best way to put it, right?
That's right.
But the winners,
absolutely.
is there is it a so long as we get 1 out of 3, 1 out of 2, 1 out of 5, like. Is there a general rule of thumb of how many successful deals, as far as like raw land all the way through the entitlement process, to those that you hit too many brick walls, you're like, this is dead. Let's turn our focus away from this one. We've already sunk enough money, and we just don't see an end in sight. Is there a general rule of thumb that you guys roll by?
I don't think so. I think the good news for Ben and I, we decide on stuff and we never had an argument. We agree pretty quickly. His office is next to mine, so I get to walk over there and he walks over here. So I guess the point is we've done several where we backed out, and we try to back out before you lose the earnest money, but we do have sunken costs. So you do spend money either on a phase 1 or phase 2 or boring samples. So you may walk away from $30,000 or $40,000, but at the end of the day, that's nothing when you're building $15 million facilities. I'd rather walk away from $30,000, $40,000 all day long than pursue this to the end, right?
So you guys been at this development thing for a number of decades. You'd mentioned you've developed, car wash and self-storage. I think you said office retail. There's a litany of things, right? I would have to say that every developer, especially someone that's been at it for as many years as you guys have, you've at least got one deal, probably more than one, but at least one that didn't go as planned. Can you share a project where things went sideways and what did go sideways and ultimately what did you learn from the experience?
A couple of things, I guess pre '07 when, the world came to a crash, I was holding a lot of vacant land that was approved for single family residences that we built a whole community. So, but there was nothing we could have done. I mean, nobody would have predicted that, right? So we took them through the entitlement process. We got them developed. I had at that time also built, we were doing office condos where we had pre-sold to doctors and lawyers. So we used those commitments to finance those deals. And then obviously when '07, started happening, '08, and everybody started walking away from contracts, but nobody could have predicted that. The second one also nobody could have predicted was COVID. So, we had an office building fully leased. It was humming, doing great. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And at the same time, we also owned the car washes. Now, the car washes didn't go bad, but like I mentioned earlier, we had to close down for about a month while they were trying to figure out what this COVID was. So both of those events were something that we hope we never see again. What did I learn? What did we learn from that? I guess, don't hold on to raw land too long.
What did the years following '08? What ultimately occurred with the raw land that you guys were holding on to? I mean, were you able to hold on to it long enough until the values at least rebounded a little bit to where you could get out whole, or just what did those 2009, 10, 11, 12? What did they look like?
No, we did not. I'll be honest with you. So I think a lot of people got their asses kicked in that year as developers. So I recall one piece of property that we purchased for $4 million, and less than 3 months later, It dropped from $4 million value to $3 million value. And the lender asked us to bring in and shore it up with $1 million, which we did because you had to do it. Nobody knew how long it was going to take. So
Yep.
the good news is, at that point, everybody was trying to sell off the assets and get what they can. And everybody, had to reshift. So we repositioned ourselves and we then started buying assets that were value add. So we were buying something that we can buy and bring value and turn it around, which we did. We bought a shopping center. I don't remember the price. I want to say we purchased it for $3 or $4 out of bankruptcy. And by the time we leased it up and sold it off, I think we flipped it for $8 or $9 million. Like everybody else, you have to shift your business plan, right? Because you just don't know. It's really important to be open. And Ben and I have that relationship with everybody that we can just pivot and shift.
It's all about being agile. It's all about being, problem solving. This is what this business is all about. Problem solving, seeing what you currently have, looking at the data, looking at the market, and doing the best you can.
So let's talk about the next 5 years, the bigger picture. What are you guys most excited about? What does the firm look like 5 years from now as far as, geographical footprint? Is there an end in sight to where, hey, we're going to roll out this, full steam ahead for 5 years, 10 years, and then we're going to wrap it all up with a pretty bow and we're going to sell it off and, go relax on it, in the Caribbean somewhere? What's the plan?
Nothing relaxing, continuously building self-storage facilities. I like this product. I like the asset type. And for me, building.
I've been blessed to have a good life as a serial entrepreneur. And I started 30 years ago, but I was doing my own thing for years. And every time I got into an adventure back when I was younger, a lot younger, all my partners were always older. And what I learned from them is you'll never retire. It's true. Because once you retire, then what do you got to look forward to? So you want to get to the point where you have enough cash like everybody else, right? What's the old saying, mailbox money, where you have a check coming every month and you still get to invest and still develop, but you're not relying on that, right? So that's my goal. So I'm 60. I want to be 80 years old and not coming to work every day. I want to be traveling and enjoying my life, but I want to be able to invest with other younger people that got the next best thing, right?
I love it. Well, Bill, Ben, it's really been a pleasure having you guys on the show here today. Appreciate you guys taking some time to share your background, your story, and some insights with us. But before we wrap it up here for the day, is there anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with? Maybe how they could connect with you and learn more about some of your upcoming projects. I mean, do you take in capital from outside sources, or how do you go about funding your projects?
Yeah, so we do. I mean, we typically look for family offices or funds that are already established or private equity that comes in. So somebody could write a check for $3 or $4 million. But we've done private placements in the past where, minimum investment is $100,000. So we're always open to that. Ben will tell you, and I kind of echo what he says, we love people, right? So if somebody we meet that says, hey, I love self-storage, would love to learn more and get involved, we love having these conversations. They can go to our website, www.self-storagedevelopers.com.
If you want, more information, you can go info@self-storagedevelopers.com and you can email us, and I'd love to talk with everybody.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you guys and appreciate you coming on the show. And, for everyone, tuning in, thanks again for listening to the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. I'm Kevin Bupp, just, reminding you to keep investing for cash flow and to live inspired. So we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.